practice some modern quoting slash costing processes that help them make better decisions. And so welcome, Gaurav.
Hey, thank you. It's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me over. Don't usually get in front of the camera. Usually the guy behind doing those stuff.
That's right.
Well, thank you for having me.
That's right. Yeah, and absolutely. So Gaurav is going to be sharing some frontline insights and processes how some of his clients have been able to overcome some of the challenges that come with a cost-based quoting process. And that brings us to our first topic. So when we say cost-based quoting, what is cost-based quoting and how is it different than the traditional and known CPQ cost price quote application? So traditional and known CPQ processes or applications assume that a product that you manufacture and all possible configurations of that product already exist, meaning they are already invented, they are costed, they are priced, and somehow they reside in some type of static database that you can pick and choose from whenever you're ready to create this product, right? That is when we talk about traditional CPQ systems, that's what they're made for, that is the whole purpose of it. Now, a little bit differently is this concept of cost-based quoting that we're talking about, right? Cost-based quoting applications are applications that assume products that we manufacture, package, and distribute either don't exist yet, meaning they have to be invented or engineered yet, but require some type of, or already exist and require some type of modification to it, right? But what it comes down to is there is a process of invention, engineering of a product, including bill of materials, routings. There's a very deep and accurate costing process that goes with it. There's a pricing logic that gets applied to it. And then we all have to have an environment that we control this business process in, right? So the methodology of costing and pricing from these configured products, so to say, depends on a series of attributes that are very, very dynamic in today's world of doing business, such as, ever-changing raw material prices, considering capacity restraints, shifting supply chains, specific customer requirements for packaging or for distribution, etc. Right? So all these things have to be considered when we cost and then price a product, right? So that is really the big differentiation between what Impact ECS does, the cost-based quoting application, and the traditional CPQ applications, right? Having said that, let's talk about some of the processes that are critical for an effective cost-based quoting program, right? So there's these customer requirements that we are getting today that need to be converted or translated into product structures, meaning there has to be some type of invention and design engineering process of, hey, these requirements are going to, in order to meet these requirements, we need to create this specific BOM and with these specific components, run it through these kind of locations and machines. We need to have a process around it that in an accurate way calculates costs and prices for existing and new products, as well as have some collaborative workflows between inside of your organization and maybe even outside of your organization that bring all this knowledge together of how should we best engineer it, provide a platform that facilitates revisions and numerous versions, etc. But this whole collaboration aspect is more and more important because nobody can do this alone, right? There's many departments in an organization that play a role in that process. Gaurav,
yep.
I'm sure you're sitting there thinking, hey, that all sounds great, right? But
this all sounds like a lot of
look at the real world.
Right. So, I mean, all this time, we go to a client and we see this problem, and each problem plays out at every single client, but it plays out differently. So like you said, convert customer requirements to product structures. I'm just thinking on two of my clients, one was a toy manufacturer and the other one was electronics component manufacturer, right? Now the toy manufacturer, there's one person dedicated to a toy. He's responsible for getting the structure ready, goes out to different team members and individually, but combines in just one person, has a full knowledge base about that toy. So that's his job, and that's what we built for him. Now electronics, like let's say somebody's building a TV or a camera set, right? I mean, for them, what happens is as soon as the requirement comes in, the bill of material team goes on and does their own thing separately, does not talk to the process team, does not talk to the purchasing team. They just know what they're going to get. So all that input needs to come in and get stored at the same time individually. So this is where part of the workflow comes in as well, while we're actually gathering the requirements, right? So it's not just one person typing in one spreadsheet and done. So similarly, I calculate cost plus prices. Oh my God, I mean, this is the main key, right? If you don't figure out the right cost, you didn't build anything. That's what I think in the manufacturing environment, what we find is calculating cost is so complicated and it's ever changing. It's not just one thing. Earlier you were talking about CPQ and the CBQ difference, cost-based versus cost price. I think cost price was great for, let's say, a dealership, right? Like you mentioned, a car manufacturer. It's not the car manufacturer, it's a car seller or a dealer that can actually say, oh, okay, you want the red car with leather seats? Okay, we'll put in the Bose system inside and done, here's your price. But the manufacturer on the other side needs to figure out, hey, what horsepower needs to go in, what color that we're putting in, what kind of bumper should we put in. So all those little details that dealer never has to deal with. Now, it gets very complicated and it changes per industry. So you can never just go from one client to the other client and say, this is how it's done, right? Just the way they do their accounting changes everything, right? So and like I mentioned, collaborating with teams. Ooh, I mean, there's two, like I mentioned. One is for requirement gathering. That's a workflow altogether. And creating the BOM and the routing. The second one is approval. So after the cost is built, there's another whole lot of workflow, which is what levels you have to go through before you send to the customer saying, hey, it's ready to do. So that's a separate workflow. So there's two types of workflows that go into it. Yeah, so any questions?
Right. Yeah, so what kind of tools do people, when we meet them or customers, before we met them, what kind of process, how do they facilitate these processes, right? I mean, let's talk about workflows. Is it mainly done via sending Excel spreadsheets via Outlook today? Is it, let's talk about cost. Is it mainly done in spreadsheets? What kind of tools do these people have in terms of facilitating these processes?
Right. So most of these customers, right, they already have some sort of a model built, but the whole model, a complicated model, is built in Excel. What that means is when you copy one Excel to the other Excel, you are free to modify it, right? And over time, the process keeps changing because you got a copy from a different person. So now all of a sudden your base is completely different. And I find it all the time, like people change the formula instead of adding a new, in Excel, right? You can say, instead of negotiating power of 1% discount, we're just gonna add 5% for this customer. And then that gets saved forever.
Just this one more time, just one time, right?
Yeah, just one time. But then,
we're gonna do it just one time.
Yeah. Problem is that people don't realize the formula has been changed, and the next 5-6 quotes that they did automatically had a 5% discount built in. Now they have underpriced themselves.
Right.
So that
right. So it's a question of.
Go ahead.
The question of robustness and having a system for facilitating the processes, right? And having a consistent logic that can be applied for sure, right? And And for, to what degree have you seen improvements once we implemented Impact ECS as such an engine in terms of the processes, right? Are they able to process things quicker? Are they able to facilitate it in a better way? Do people feel more included in the process?
Right. So, I mean, all of the above, right? So that's the goal that we go in, is to make sure that our speed increases. So there's no time being wasted in somebody sending an email to you with the BOM in an Excel, and then you copy pasting it eventually a day later. All that stuff gets automatically integrated as soon as one person puts in. So the speed is obviously increased, and there's no loss of translation. That's a big one. And second, I think overall, the visibility of what all is happening at your manufacturing plant, especially in the quoting division, gets better. So one of the, again, the toy company that I was talking about earlier, what they built was a dashboard that tells them, hey, I have 15 to 20 pricing analysts. They're working on that many different toys, and I want to know the status of each one by user activity. So they can actually just tell, hey, this XYZ person only did 2 quotes and they went from this status to this status. So maybe he's not doing a good job, or maybe he has availability, let's give him more work, right? So they have the visibility of exactly what's happening. At the end of the day, they also have dashboard. How many quotes actually went through our pricing team, right? What is the quantity? What is the dollar value?
No.
Yeah, so they have the complete visibility of that at the end of the project.
Yeah, that makes great sense. And so since we're just talking about it, what are some of the major benefits of implementing a cost-based quoting application? Obviously there's this concept of having one single source of truth, one central access of data to existing and new product structures, including BOMs, routings, prices, version history, right? I mean, no product nowadays is invented, engineered, costed, and priced in just one version. Right? There's so many iterations that go through it, right? It's a very important aspect. And then having a platform that facilitates this consistent, repeatable, and harmonized approach and methodology for how do we cost our products that we manufacture and distribute, right? How do we price them, right? Having insights of comparing or benchmarking similar products over time across industries, across customers. And then, of course, engaging the quoting and pricing, engineering, commercial teams all together. Everybody feels they have a stake in it, sharing the love of the knowledge that's out there in this organization, right? And together, I mean, when all this knowledge comes together in one platform, it just comes out in better results at the end of the day, right? Have you seen all these three or all these big benefits with your customers?
We definitely have. So first one, right? I'll give you an example of what happened when we went into this plastic printing film, right? Their BOMs, they are in a software, can I say the name, JD Edwards, right? That's where they used to keep their BOMs, right? And then what happens is when they actually ready to give a quote, somebody logs into JD Edwards, they figure out what bill of materials they're going to use, and then we'll copy that into an Excel. And then they will sometimes modify that BOM, right? So they will modify that BOM in order to, inside their Excel template, in order to meet the requirements. So now it's not the truth, it has completely changed, and you don't know how or why it was changed. All you know is a different BOM. Same thing happens with the routing. They go to a different system, Prism, and they get the information. Prices, they go to a SharePoint site or their old Excel that they may have a list of all the raw materials they have. So in raw materials they have, I just want to mention the complexity of it is what kind of raw materials go into it. There's resins that go into a printing of a film. There's a pre-existing films, the color quality, the metals that go into it, and many other OP, the varnishes and all the other details that go into it. So all those prices, they could have been 2 or 3 months old that they're pricing on. And they will go ahead, create a quote, and they'll be like, oh, this is great, we won the bid. Yeah, because we price came out lower, Then anybody else, any of the competitors, they get the bid. But then what? They go to the production floor. They're like, what did you sell? This is not something that we can actually sustain because we're in loss every time we manufacture this product. So there was, I think it hits all the points. There was no one truth, right? And then the operations team and the pricing team and the people on the plant floor, they were not looking at the one thing. So overall, after we put in the project, it all got solved, right? I mean, these problems were resolved. They actually looked at the same thing and they actually found issues that they were doing wrong. So overall, the data got cleaner and better, and they're running much smoother. Yeah.
Right. So I'm gonna ask you a trick question now, Gaurav.
Oh.
How come all these companies spend all these millions of dollars on these transactional ERP systems and BI systems, and then when it comes to facilitating and calculating your cost and your prices that you're going to quote new business with, you do it in a $19.99 per month subscription called Accept, right? I mean, that just doesn't make sense from the beginning, right?
So none of the ERPs really, especially most of the implementations, don't plan for the complexity of the actual costing, right? They always have a place or buckets to put in certain costs, right? And then they will add them all up. Hey, this is my overhead cost. This is my the BOM cost. Here's my product cost. But nobody actually plans for how did you get to that real cost, right?
Right.
And it changes. I mean, it's not like, hey, did you do, I don't know if you're covering this, but make versus buy is one of those examples, right? How do you know, I mean, the product cost
Absolutely.
that you put in lower because you decided to make it or buy it? I mean, we can, I don't know if you want to talk about it in a separate slide, but we can definitely talk about it more. But
yeah, no, that's a good transition actually to the next slide. So in terms of a decision-making process, one example you just mentioned, make versus buy decisions, right? How can Impact SCS as a cost-based quoting or a new pricing engine help make you better decisions and save bottom line, right? Get more profits out of it. Of course, it helps evaluate risk and opportunities in a proactive way. So before they occur, right? They have the ability to do these what if scenarios. What if I decide to make this item versus buying this component, right? Or vice versa. I said, well, maybe it just takes me I have too much labor in the process of making it. Maybe we should just outsource it and buy it, right? So these can evaluate these risks and opportunities early in a transparent way across the organization for operations, for the finance department, for the C-level executive. It's a very important aspect. And then obviously, we don't talk about this enough, but quoting or estimating or costing should never stop once you costed a product, right? It just keeps continuing, right? Because people always want to look at what is after the fact, post acceptance of this quote. What are my costs? How will we do it? Are we achieving the margins we plan to achieve, right? And why didn't we, if so, right? But overall, just another aspect is then the decision-making process. If we can improve the speed of the quote creation and increase the quality of the quote accuracy, it will help us make better decisions and will lead us to more profits, right?
So, you're absolutely right. I think it's really important for them to understand the product does not stop just because you quoted it, right? You quote a product, it's like, okay, it's $1 a product, and then you end up creating a sample for it. You send the sample, it goes to a QA on the client side. Then they're like, oh, it would be nice if you can just modify it this certain way. Now the product comes back on the floor, what they're actually going to develop is different from what you quoted. So you need to be, there has to be one system that can actually tell you, look, you're not developing what you quoted. Maybe you need to re-quote this product, right? Don't just keep developing something just because
right.
it's right.
or at least enable you to have a conversation with the customer and say, hey, when we first got in business together, right, this is what the assumptions were, right? Let's say the raw material price levels were at this level. Right now, all of a sudden, they're much higher. So we got to come to a win-win agreement here, right? And having this in a transparent way helps facilitate and guide that conversation, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's simple things too, right? It's like, I was talking about the printing film example, right? In there, give you an example, like a bottle cover, right? Like this one, right? This bottle covers, these are being printed somewhere. So they're like, well, I just need a white film by a 2 by 2, 2 inches by 2 inches logo on it. Just give me a quote. But it's not the same, right? I mean, what if it just has 2 colors in it? Does it have 3 colors in it? What if it has 10 colors in it? There are only a few machines can handle 10 colors. So now you're talking about capacity. You have the capacity for it. So the rate better go up, right? If you're using 10 colors. Hey, do you need it to be microwavable? Yeah, of course we can print the logo, but if it's going to go on a Campbell bottle, which is going to be microwaved, then you're going to use a different color altogether. So those kind of things, the details matter, and these keep changing as we go on in the process of coding, which is why the last time you mentioned there's versions, right? This is how the versions get created, or sometimes I like to call it variations. It's like, they're like, hey, I want to quote this, but just a little modified one, and then give me the price for both, and then we'll compare the two and see which one comes out better, right? So all those versions happen over time.
Right.
Yeah, right. And then improve speed to code creation and code accuracy. I mean, it's that's a self. I think to me, it's pretty obvious, right? You wanna get there faster. You want to be the first one to provide that quote as fast as possible. You know, more time the client gets to look at it, understand your BOM, your. You know, it's funny because I actually work on the both sides, right, from the manufacturer side as well. So a lot of times, customer doesn't know what they want or what the BOM is going to be, right? The first person.
That's right. So it needs to be invented.
Right. So the first person who gives a quote becomes a benchmark, like, for everybody else, right? So you get an automatic approval for the first one. So the quote, the speed matters a lot. You can be last minute one. You can always modify it later, right? Once the conversation starts. But it's better to get it right the first.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, I want to bring up this last topic, right? So I had some interesting conversations with some customers recently, or prospects recently, that were asking me, hey, does your platform, facilitate give you benchmark labor rates or benchmark prices, et cetera, or market prices? And I said, no, we don't do that. That's not what Impact XCS. However, I think there's great potential if you build up your own database with your own information and do this over months and years. You're going to have most accurate benchmark data of hey, what is competitive in the market? When did we win the business? We won the business whenever we had this labor rate in this country for this process, right? That's when we won business. So creating your own intelligence inside of this platform, I think can be a big differentiator of winning more business in the future and being even more competitive.
Right. Especially if the product is complicated, right? You're not going to get that data anywhere else. There's not even a competitor that does the same thing that you do exactly, right? Because each machine is curated in the plant to your specific needs. There's no two of exactly the same made. So how you do business, where do you cut costs? How do you become profitable? Where your margins are coming from? They're unique to you. So your data is the only way you can tell how do you improve on it. Market won't tell you anything really.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I appreciate the insights. And so thank you guys very much for joining our cost talk today. We encourage you to contact us, contact Gaurav, contact myself, email us, call us. We're here and we want to talk costs with you. We want to talk quoting with you. We want to talk pricing with you. This is what we do every day, and we're very passionate about it. and I appreciate you guys' time, and thank you, Gaurav, for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Nice talking to everybody.